So I'm
Get rolling and call the roll.
Mario Ryan,
Here.
Bart Bartles,
Here.
Morgan Johnston,
here.
Todd Russ,
Here.
Andrew Stone,
Here.
Rachel Belenga,
Here.
Stephen Walt.
Here.
Great, we have a quorum. Do we have any changes to the agenda for tonight? All right. And how about the minutes from the previous meeting? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a
Seconded.
Great. Is there any discussion, any changes? All right. All those in favor of approving signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, those are approved. Do we have any members of the public with us this evening who'd like to address us? Will you please come forward?
I'm an
and-
observer.
She doesn't want to address us.
No?
Observer.
Okay. Let's move to our communications and start with the staff report. Scott, looks like there's a lot going on in this couple
Yep.
months.
First on evaluating different ways to address green building standards. Staff has evaluated a bunch of different options, different things other cities are doing. We looked at tax abatements that some cities are doing. We looked at different incentives. And what we determined is that in our market, we would not expect that small cash incentives alone would be enough to convert say a conventional building to a LEED building or a passive house building or Energy Star building. And so what we're looking at now is more of a suite of activities that run the gamut from incentives being maybe the last thing you do to education and engagement of the building community and sort of building relationships and sharing information about these standards because there's really not a lot of penetration for them outside of the institutional sector in our market. So that's something we're still pursuing and evaluating. Next, we've sent some of the communications that we had called for in our climate action plan. The first one was a letter to Ameren, Illinois, their renewables folks. And we asked a couple of things of them. First, we asked if they can support Energy Star Portfolio Manager web services. That is an API, which is like a program that connects two databases. Web services would allow folks who are participating in Energy Star Portfolio Manager, similar to, well, not similar to, including people who are participating in our Urbana-Champaign Energy Star Challenge, to have their energy consumption data automatically ported from Ameren's computers to Energy Star Portfolio Manager's computer without having to pick up the bill and type the information back in. So we've asked them to support web services. We also asked them to support something that's already in the law in Illinois, which is, Illinois calls it meter aggregation. A lot of other states call it virtual net metering. And that's a concept where, say you have a house in town with lots of trees shading your roof. Solar panels on the roof aren't really a very good option, but a property owner on the edge of town has a big open field. That property owner can put 20 solar panels down, 100 solar panels down, whatever it is, ground mounted, bigger, single project, all cheaper to install. And then he can sell, or she can sell you the production of any one metered solar panel or 5 metered solar panels to your house in town, and the two are virtually net metered because they're not actually on the same meter, but the consumption on one side and the production on one side are combined for your total bill. That's specifically allowed in Illinois state law. It's just a matter of whether utilities choose to facilitate the billing. So because there's a lot of advantages of bigger ground-mounted solar panel systems compared to smaller individual roof-mounted, so which is basically the cheaper. We thought that would be an excellent opportunity for us to, another opportunity for us to get into more renewables. So we sent them a letter asking them to support that. They replied with a letter describing some of the technical challenges to do both of those. And so that's where that stands now. We've also sent a letter to the Illinois State Water Survey asking them to review and ensure that the accuracy and make sure it's up to date. This document they call Bulletin 70. That's the document that describes the design storm, the 50-year design storm, the 100-year design storm, or design flood sometimes called. And so most cities like Urbana reference that document in terms of deciding how much stormwater retention an individual development needs to have. So you take an empty lot and you put a parking lot and a building on it, you have all this new impervious. We don't allow people to just send that stormwater to flood their neighbor downstream. They have to manage it. And so Bulletin 70 is really important with that. And so that's part of the adaptation part of our climate action plan. We also finished up our first round of the Urbana-Champaign Energy Star Challenge. There's an attachment in the packet. Those are PowerPoint slides from our awards event. We awarded buildings that were high achievers in Energy Star score or energy use intensity if their building type did not apply or did not qualify for Energy Star score. Everyone at the awards and all the partners who have been working on this program all agreed that we should run that challenge again, do another round for 2015.
Great.
So yeah, pretty pleased with that. And in terms of the numbers and comparing ourselves to other cities, our numbers were quite good. So I'm pretty happy with that. And so we're going to run another round, and we'll see, whether we can repeat that success, whether we have more participation, whether we have less, and again, be evaluated afterwards. The City Green team is currently in 7th place. I haven't checked in maybe 2 days, but are we still in 7th place?
Morgan's making a run to pass you.
Uh-oh.
I think I'm number 9 and you're number 8.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know who's higher.
Somebody jumped up.
I was 10. I made it to 9 today.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if we're going to be able to beat you, but we're going to try.
Yeah. Well, we're in the top 10 anyway,
Yeah.
out of 30-some
Mhm.
Participating.
Right. And that competition is going to end sometime this month.
Yeah, everything ends on April 30th except for the energy tracking data. That'll be the last activity that we need to wait for the last bill.
Okay. Great. We also have, I mentioned a couple of public speaking opportunities that we've participated in the last 2 months. We've got some progress on our water management plan. May 16th, we'll be having another rain barrel and compost bin sale. These are sort of a bulk purchase sales event, so the prices are really great. And that'll be in the parking lot north of the city building again. And there's some information in the packet, and we're promoting that pretty widely. Have some really great results from our city facilities water consumption, and I've got some data and graph in the council packet. I think I want to quote it rather than recollect it. Overall, city facilities water consumption is 48% lower in 2014 than 2012, so 2-year change. Most of that was in irrigation for lots of different reasons. We did have a small grant to install some automatic irrigation controls, but I think a lot of that savings has also come from repairs and right sizing of existing irrigation systems. I think there was a lot of leaks that were happening that we've now plugged up and fixed. We also had some building water savings from the installation of low flow faucet aerators and a new cooling system for the server room. And talked about those before. That happened a year or so ago. Some other data we got from the Arbor Division that also relates to some of our adaptation goals. The tree species selected for planting in 2015, 46% of those are native to North America. You may recall that the Arbor Division does not exclusively use native trees, although they are increasing the number of native trees. Part of the reason that they don't exclusively choose native trees is their first priority, well, I think a high priority anyway, is species diversity. And so what they're doing is spreading their bets. So if there's different weather and climate, if there's different pests, the damage will be minimal because they've got a great diversity of species and genus. They also have installed some water conserving baskets. We have baskets on light poles downtown, and they've installed some that do a better job of holding water in, so that hopefully will cut down on the amount of watering that we're doing in downtown. We don't have a lot of automatic irrigation systems downtown, so what that means is we drive a big water truck downtown, so we're using aquifer water and fuel to water those. So it's good that we have some better facilities that will conserve water there. We were awarded sole source aquifer status for the Muhammad Aquifer, so that's a great achievement. And the city, along with 24 maybe other partners, municipal partners in Central Illinois, are continuing to work the legal route to prevent the storage of PCBs over the top of the aquifer.
Why does it say a portion of the aquifer? Is it the whole portion that was requested? Because I know just the way you have it written is they decided to designate a portion of the aquifer as a sole source aquifer. Is that the full portion that was originally suggested, like all of the
It's everything we asked
Illinois?
for. However, the aquifer goes into Indiana, and our application ended at the state line.
Well, actually, it had ended at
Is that right?
the watershed near the state line. They couldn't go to the state line, so that's why it's portioned. Because there's a very small strip along the state line that's not included.
Okay.
But they use it as a watershed boundary of the groundwater flow. So.
Cool.
Okay. Other communications, our U-Cycle program, Courtney Kwong also has sent letters to our local state legislators and asking them to support some legislation that would fix a weakness in our existing recycling legislation, whereby we are running out of the ability, the monies available to recycle electronics in the first few months of the year, and people are storing, building up, and dumping electronics because they are already they're always banned from the landfill. So we're hoping to get some supportive legislation there. I think that's all I have for staff.
All right, other questions or comments? Did have a couple. I was wondering with the green building, you're talking about that there would be some activities to try to drum up some interest in green building. Have you gotten to the point of specifics on that yet, or is that still kind of discussed?
We're kind of exploring this concept that DOE is using for solar energy market development, the idea of a roadmap. And so kind of thinking about what is the sequence, what are the suite of activities, and what would the proper sequence be to do them. And so, yeah, we're still talking about it, and would love any comments or support on that. So, certainly thought about USGBC. They're an advocate for these buildings, obviously.
Right.
And so what are they doing? What can they do? How can we support that?
And I take it the political climate is such that requiring certification is not on the table at the moment.
Yeah, we're just in a phase where we're working hard to attract new development, and any new cost barriers can be problematic. One of the things.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you have any thoughts as far as providing an option, for instance, an additional option along the PUD front for developers that might be interested in a lead for neighborhood development?
So that's something we had looked at actually when we were writing the climate action plan at staff level. we had looked at whether we could create a new parcel unit development type, which is kind of an alternative pathway to the traditional zoning pathway for development. A new parcel unit development type that would basically reference, or adopt by reference, lead for neighborhood development. And staff decided that we didn't want to open up the existing zoning regulations, but instead wanted to look at the subdivision code and see if there were some particular items, particular language within lead MD that we could bring over into the subdivision code. So that that process is still forthcoming. I have one other thing, unless there's other questions.
Yeah, just briefly, I will comment on a question. I really liked those environmental performance metrics.
That's what I was going to talk about.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been contemplating for a while now, what data do we have, what data should we have, and how can we present it in a way that is accessible. I have observed other cities who have really fabulous and lengthy environmental reports, sustainability reports. I also observed that some of them have graphic design companies' logos on the backside, so they're spending a lot of money. I also observed that 100-page, 200-page, 300-page documents, much of it doesn't really get read. So I think it's desirable to have an appealing design so that it, data reporting is accessible, and I think it's desirable to keep it succinct. So what I've started here is just a memo format of this environmental sustainability performance metrics, and I have put in basically one top-level visualization from kind of the 4 buckets of work that the environmental sustainability division does: energy and climate, water, recycling, and nuisances. And so this is a first effort. There are already some comments I've gotten back from recommendations from other staff that I'll probably change next year. What I envision is perhaps next year, these 4 visualizations would be kind of like the executive summary, and then there may be a section for each one where there's a couple more metrics in that category. So for instance, we have community water consumption, and this is an area graph, and it shows each individual sector's contribution, and then all the sectors stacked together equal the total for the entire community. But what I don't have here, because this is just top level, is what was in staff report. What's the city facilities? That's sort of a subsidiary related metric. So that can be in a section that has some more details. So I think this is valuable in terms of communicating our big picture. And next year we may be able to spend some more time on moving it from a memo format to more of a report kind of graphic design.
So we'll see that, future iterations of that again.
That's my intention. I'm scaling up to that just to be conscious of the cost benefit of staff time, whether you're going to pay a designer on the one hand, and the benefit you're going to get out of it in terms of communications and who's going to read it and so forth.
I really like this version. This is something that people will actually read.
Yeah.
What's a nuisance?
So nuisances, so there's 2 types of code enforcement or nuisance enforcement that the city does. One is in the building, on the building, of the building, and the other is everything else on the landscape. The Environmental Sustainability Division oversees one staff person who deals with weeds and tall grass, sanitary nuisances, garbage, refuse on the ground, sidewalk snow removal, those sorts of nuisances. So in thinking about that, we have tons of data, and actually it's all available on our open data website, which you can reach from urbanaillinois.us, and you can slice up that data and visualize it any way you like. But in terms of what is really important, I thought that first of all, the total and the trend, which you have, is important. And so we see that there are less nuisances over time, although it's somewhat erratic. And then I also thought it was really important as to things that we can have influence on. What percentage or what proportion was owner abated versus what proportion was city abated. And what that means is we send a letter and say you're in violation of getting your garbage hauled off in 7 days, whatever it might be. And they take care of it before you have to correct this in 7 days or whatever the time frame is. The owner takes care of it and abates the nuisance themselves within the time period. That's owner abated. If they don't take care of it within the time period, we send all of our proper warnings, and we have to then hire a contractor to cut the grass or remove the garbage, whatever it might be. That's city abated. That's the one we want to keep to a minimum.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Mhm.
On the greenhouse gas chart, is the industrial, commercial, and residential all energy? Could we say, is that what it is? So it's greenhouse gases from industrial energy, commercial energy, and residential energy? Or no?
Yeah, I think you're correct. So,
Because that would be,
Catching.
I think that'd be helpful clarity.
well, it's from, yes, so, residential, that blue bar would be gas and electric, and I think there's propane or something in there. And then transportation would be diesel and gasoline, not utility. So I guess either way, they're energy.
Oh, yeah. No, I was looking at, water, waste, transportation, energy emissions. I was thinking like scope 1 type of stuff with the
It's-
emissions, but
Yeah, it's what is, say, burned on site, so gasoline, diesel, and generator fuels. And it's what is, and natural gas, also burned on site. And it's also what is burned off-site for your electricity. So that's grid electricity.
yeah.
We do not take into account consumption emissions. So you buy a product that had greenhouse gas emissions in another country where it was produced, we don't take that into account.
I guess all I was saying was with that label on the chart for the greenhouse gases,
Mhm.
I think it would be good to note that that is about the energy from those the word. I don't know if you disagree though from what you were saying, because transportation is energy. It's
Yeah,
true.
it absolutely is.
In the climate action plan, we have other climate or CO2 emission sources other than energy. So we have solid waste, and I think we also have, and I know that they're proportionally small,
Yeah.
but I think that might be part of the distinction.
That's a
or
good
the
point.
reason
Yeah,
for
the words-
labeling.
So solid waste actually
They have
isn't
solid waste.
energy, it's from the decay of
Right.
waste in the landfill, which produces methane. So that's an
Right.
example where, we could label,
We treat it in the climate action plan, but maybe not in.
it's here.
It's
Oh,
on
okay.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, let's think
I
more
guess
about that.
matching it up to what it says in the
Thanks.
climate action plan. I don't know if it just says industrial, or if it says industrial, building, energy, burning, whatever it actually says.
Yeah, and I think there might be a little
Matching those
looseness in the
labels is what I was
terminology
talking
there as
about,
well,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that
But I
and
think it's really cool.
think about what we need to do to be explicit.
I had a question on another one of the graphs, and that was the one with solid waste.
Mhm.
And I was just curious if you know what accounts for, it looks like the line was more or less flat, and then it kind of went up. It spiked, kind of moving up to 2013, and then it's gradually coming down again.
Mhm.
Do you know what accounted for that?
It's hard to speculate.
Yeah.
Up till 2013, I would have said it's economic recovery. We're buying more stuff, we're throwing more stuff away, we're recycling more stuff. But then it went down in 2014.
Yeah.
It could be waste reduction practices, although a big change in waste reduction practices in 1 year you might not expect. It could be variations in data reporting. So, we don't weigh all this. This comes in from different hauler reports. All the private haulers give us their data. There may be rounding going on. Well, the truck is 3/4 full or 9/10 full. So it's hard to speculate.
All right, anything else?
Good.
Great. Well, next, we've got Kevin Borgia from Wind and Wires to talk to us about renewable energy. Thank you very much for making a second attempt to come down here, and I'm glad there wasn't
Yeah.
snow this time.
Absolutely. Again, yeah, sorry I wasn't able to make it the last time.
Well, let's see how it
I got about as far as, I live in Chicago, and I got about as far as Roosevelt Avenue.
Not very far.
And the snow was coming down, and I'm like, this is not a good idea. So that was the end of my first attempt here. I can't see. Did anyone see what the slideshow? Is that what that says?
Yep.
And then where am I going?
All the way to, yep.
Right there?
Yep.
All right, here we go. So yeah, anyway, this is my second attempt. I actually made it this time. So again, as I was introduced, my name is Kevin Borgia. I'm with a group called Wind on the Wires. We're a nonprofit organization that represents wind energy developers and manufacturers. We work throughout 9 states, and I have the pleasure and curse of focusing on Illinois and our difficult politics that we have here. So what I thought I'd do, Scott had asked me to come down and give a kind of an overview of general wind power issues and how communities can get involved. Does that sound about right? So I'm happy to do that. So again, my organization works to advocate for wind power throughout most states in the Midwest. The Midwest is the best wind resources that we have in the country. And Illinois is actually one of the most important states that we have as far as wind power goes. I do live in Chicago. My mother here lives in Urbana, and so you've helped me to look like a good son by coming down here to Champaign. What I thought I'd do is get a bit of an idea. I hear about discussion of the Climate Action Plan. I think we've talked about that before. What's the status of that? Can you just give me a little background?
So we're in a second phase. It goes through 2020. The goals are to reduce greenhouse gases 25% by 2020 and 80% by 2050.
Okay.
A big portion of our existing reductions come from the purchase of renewable energy credits through municipal electric aggregation.
Okay, got it. And so that's good, and it sounds like it's comprehensive, right? I mean, it's not just it's transportation stuff; it's all sorts of kind of multi-pronged approaches. So that sounds really comprehensive. Maybe I was also thinking, I'd like to know kind of who you guys are and kind of what your backgrounds are a little bit. Can we go around the table and just have folks kind of give me a little bit of background, just quick, your name and kind of how you're involved in sustainability?
Sure. My name is Rachel Belenga. I'm a Sierra Club board member, and I'm a member of this board, and a children's librarian.
What's that?
A children's librarian at
Oh, okay.
Anna Free Public Library.
Todd Rusk. I'm with the University of Illinois. I'm an engineer, and I'm with Smart Energy Design Assistance Center.
Oh, what is that?
Energy efficiency for consultation for buildings around state of Illinois.
Oh, cool. Interesting.
I'm
Okay.
Steve Wald. I work for U of I2 for Extension, and my background is in public policy, energy policy, water policy.
Oh, great.
I do communications for Extension.
Great.
I'm Andrew Stumpf. I also work for the university. I'm with the Illinois State Geological Survey as a geologist.
Well,
I'm Murray Ryan. Up until last summer, I was running certification programs in the tree care industry over at the International Society of Arboriculture. And then since last summer, I've been working on getting a consulting business going, doing management consulting in the environmental arena.
oh, cool. And good to see you again, by the way.
Likewise.
You gonna skip yourself? Okay. Barb Bartles. I'm with the Illinois Sustainable Technology Center. I've
Okay.
got a business background, and I'm the administrator of the Illinois Green Office Challenge, and I think I've talked to you about that before.
Yeah.
In Bloomington.
Right.
I'm Morgan Johnston. I'm the Associate Director at Facilities and Services on campus, and I'm the Director of Sustainability for FNS. I think we've exchanged
Yeah, we've
emails.
talked a lot back.
We haven't really met.
I don't think we've
before.
met. Yeah, right.
But Kent Reefstack and I have been working we're working on we did a RFP for a wind power purchase agreement. We're going through the evaluation of the responses. And
Oh, really?
determining how much to get for the university. There's a whole evaluation
Mhm.
committee. And I was the point person for developing the solar farm on campus. And we recently bought some wind green E MISO RECs to get to the 5% renewable energy goal that we had for campus for this year. So
Wow.
I've been learning a lot about wind energy in Illinois.
Oh, MISO Rex, that's a fun topic.
MISO green E RECs.
Oh, Green E-Rex, yeah.
Green E RECs from MISO
You can
Wind.
get the MRETS Rex,
That's what
those
we
weren't good enough for you?
Uh,
We can talk acronyms all night long. We can talk
We're pretty happy
FAFWA,
with-
4 and 5 word acronyms. Cool, well, good to see you. Go ahead.
Well, I can present myself now. I'm not part of the committee, but I'm
Oh, okay.
doing the next presentation.
Oh,
I'm,
okay, cool.
I'm Fernanda Maciel. I'm a master's student at the University of Illinois, and I'm in energy and water sustainability program.
Oh, cool, great. Well, this is a great group. You guys are clearly involved, people that deserve to be on this, not just, you wanted to do something with your Tuesday nights. So, and it looks like I know a lot of you now that I think about it. So, okay, so what I thought I'd do, again, we just do a little overview of wind power in Illinois, wind power being Illinois' dominant renewable electricity resource. Talk about some of the benefits, some of the past trends, future trends, and a little bit on policy and how folks can get involved, whether as part of this organization, as part of the city, maybe part of the university, or just as interested citizens. So, there we go. So, as a wind energy advocate in the state of Illinois, I'm legally bound to begin my presentations with this quote, which is a real quote. I didn't make it up, which is great that Lincoln said this. I believe he wrote it in a letter in about 1858. And so it's interesting, even back in the day, Lincoln was thinking about this. And of course, we've got a picture of Lincoln, known as the Rail Splitter. And on the left here, we have the Rail Splitter Wind Farm, which is near Lincoln, Illinois. So, anyway, like I said, I'm legally bound to begin my presentation with that. Can everybody see that, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. So, like I said, just some quick kind of talking points to start with. We're the 16th largest state for wind potential, but we're number 5 for installed capacity. That's for a couple of reasons that I'll get into in a minute. We used to be number 4, by the way. Oklahoma jumped over us, and we can't let Oklahoma win. All right. But yeah, until last year we were actually number 4. So we'll continue to move further back if we don't fix some things in Illinois. But we do have 3,800 megawatts of wind installed, which is enough, by the way, to make it real, power about 1 million homes on average, which is pretty significant considering we built our first wind farm in 2003 in Illinois. In 2012, we added 800 megawatts. In 2013 and 14, we added 0 because some of the legal and structural problems we have with our state's renewable energy law. However, despite those problems, we're going to build 274 megawatts of wind this year. Some of it over in Vermilion County. I'll talk about that project in a second. And then some of it up in Kankakee and Iroquois County. So, again, that's a significant growth trajectory from the past just 10 years. But, again, there's some problems that are going to hinder us moving forward. Looking at the manufacturing and the business side of things, we're actually a very strong state for the wind energy business, too. Most of these companies are located in Chicago, conveniently known as the Windy City, by the way, of course. A lot of these guys these are corporate offices that are based up there, but there is some manufacturing activity that's going on in the Chicago region, as well as in central Illinois. Over in Clinton, there's a company called Trinity Towers that's making very large rolled steel towers for turbines, and so it's pretty significant. We've got a lot of manufacturing activity happening here too, as well as the growth in projects. So I did talk about the map itself and where the projects are. This is a lot of words on this slide here, I realized. But this gives you an idea of kind of where the wind projects are. As you'll look at the two in the bottom left in orange there, those are the 2 projects currently under construction. And what's interesting about those 2 projects, basically because of the problems in our state's renewable energy law, our utilities aren't really buying wind power today. They're buying RECs, and that's good, but it's not the kind of meaningful purchases of renewable energy that facilitates growth of renewables. And so our utilities aren't buying power, but guess who is? Large energy users. So those 2 projects there, the Pilot Hill project in Kankakee, is being built specifically to supply power to Microsoft. So when you use Bing or if anyone uses Bing, when you use whatever Microsoft online services are available, the data center that is operating a lot of those searches is located in the Chicago suburbs, and that's powered or will be powered by the Pilot Hill Wind Farm. So that's pretty significant. We're seeing those kind of direct purchases happening. The other I think even more unique one is over in Vermilion County near Hoopeston. There's a wind project there being built that's going to supply every IKEA store in America. So they're going to take the power from that facility, sell it into the market, into the wholesale market, and then they're going to offset that with purchases at whatever those sites are. So it's not that they're specifically going to use the electrons produced at that site, but that's going to help them to offset their broader costs. So, and that's pretty significant. What's interesting about Hoopeston is they're not just buying the power. IKEA owns that project, right? So that means IKEA is now in the power plant business, which is pretty significant, right? And I think what's also really unique about that is people talk about, these companies are buying RECs, they're buying, renewable power, but that's all just PR, right? That wind farm cost about $200 million to build and operate. You don't do a $200 million PR move, right? So I think it's significant that what IKEA did in Vermilion County is they took a real step. They really are all in, thinking this is a good business decision. So, the IKEA project is unique from Microsoft. Microsoft is just buying the power, but still, it's significant enough that that's going to create the additionality and create the long-term financial signal that a company was able to build a project just to supply it. So that's pretty great. So that's one of the most exciting trends that's happening in Illinois right now. And in other states, Facebook is doing this. Over in Indiana, Amazon is doing the same thing. Google's bought a bunch of wind farms. And so you're starting to see that happen. Again, the tech giants, but also other companies like IKEA are getting into this space too, which is really fantastic. So the general strengths of Illinois, again, I said we're 16th in wind resource, but we're 5 for development. And a lot of that has to do with a couple different things. Primarily, we have close proximity to the load, right? So you need power in Chicago. We have a big electric load. We're the fifth largest electric load in the country. And so we might not have the best winds in America. In Illinois, the Dakotas and Nebraska and other states will beat us, but they have no people. There's no access to the load, right? They're not near the demand. And so until we build some very long transmission lines, which is something that's happening currently, we're not able to sell that power. So Illinois has decent wind resource, but it's very close to a big, big demand center. So that's been a big benefit. The other one, and looking at these two maps, obviously the red is the stronger areas of wind resource, and you notice that directly corresponds to a lot of where the projects are being built. So the other thing that's interesting is that Illinois is, at least in northern Illinois, in the ComEd service territory, is part of the PJM Interconnect, which is, again, some of you probably know this, is the large energy grid that connects from all the way to the Mississippi River all the way out to the Atlantic coast. Those states all have renewable energy mandates, and the wind is not as strong in those states. Of the PJM states, Illinois has the strongest wind. So wind becomes an export commodity for the state because we've got better wind, we've got what they need to buy, and so we can help them meet their RPS demands more cheaply than they can with their own native wind. So that is a great thing for us. It's too bad for them; they don't get to build as much wind as we do. So. And then the third component is the RPS policy that we have in Illinois. Again, this is riddled with some problems that I'll talk about in a minute, but again, having that signal out there was helpful in the early years to help build some wind projects in Illinois, and some solar too. Any questions so far, or should I just keep going through this? Sounds good. Here's a quick bit on the Renewable Energy Standard, just the basic stuff here. We have a mandate to get 25% of our electricity from renewables by 2025. That has interim goals that escalate. That'll be, there's also some subdivided goals below that. 75% of the overall RPS portfolio needs to come from wind, and 6.25 of that needs to come from solar. So that creates a significant opportunity for both wind and solar in Illinois. Although wind is so cheap in comparison to all the other renewables that wind is actually dominating and coming in much higher than that 75% in previous procurements. But like I said, on the left, the law is broken. So we'll come back to that in a minute. And then the other key thing to focus on is there is a cost cap that ensures that costs are not going to go out of control from the introduction of renewables, which, by the way, you won't get that promise from the nuclear business. You won't get that promise from the coal business. Whatever the cost is of producing those plants, we have to pay it. So that's something that's unique to renewables, and the analysis we have shows we can meet this goal under that cost cap. Again, if we open it up to competition and run the law the right way. So looking at the broader economic impact of wind in Illinois, Illinois State University did a great study looking at all the jobs that are created and and that's in construction and in operations. The big jobs are definitely in construction, like it says. But there's a significant amount of money being paid to landowners who host turbines. Basically, they're able to farm right up to it, and so they lose about a quarter of an acre for the road and the turbine itself, but then they get paid between $5,000 and $10,000 to do nothing. It's a pretty good gig if you can get it, right? And it becomes a great hedge for those farmers. And then, of course, there's significant property tax benefits. It's actually more than the landowner payments. The average 100 megawatt wind farm in Illinois provides about $1 million in the first year to local communities. And again, these are communities like Hoopeston, right? So Hoopeston doesn't have a big tax base. But now they have a 100 megawatt wind farm providing them about $1 million a year. That's significant for the Hoopeston School District. The Corn Jerkers, I believe, is the name of their unfortunately named team. So that's pretty significant for a lot of these rural communities, and that's a really great thing that Illinois State studied. So now, but it's not all about cost, right? It's not all about adding money to our electric bill so we can feel good. There's been a significant economic benefit from wind that we've noticed in the past few years. So let me jump ahead. So for folks that understand how power markets work, power is not sold on a consistent basis in real-time markets. Power is sold on a supply and demand basis in a couple different marketplaces, but one is real-time power markets. So it costs a different amount of money to produce power during the middle of the day than it does at night when the demand is very low. And so the orange line that you see here, that's actual data from the PJM interconnect for the past 3 years. That's average hourly data from the past 3 years from PJM in northern Illinois. And so, like you can see, at about midnight, power costs about $25. It dips down at about 3 a.m. to about 20, and then kind of spikes up as we all turn our lights on and go about our day. And we reach a peak around 5 or 6 p.m. Where power starts to cost upwards of almost $45, right? So it's a significant fluctuation. This is pretty consistent, by the way, over the course of a year. And so what happens when you inject wind into the system, and other renewables too, is that you have a consistent cost of that power. So once you build a wind farm, you know what your capital cost was, and you know what your general operations costs are going to be. And then you're able to put out a bid into the power market and say, we'll sell you power for 20 years for $35, $45, whatever the cost is, and it's going to be flat. You're going to have some escalators for inflation and that kind of thing. But primarily, you're going to have a flat cost. And you can do that with wind, you can do that with solar. You're never getting that deal from natural gas, coal, or nuclear, ever, because those are commodities, right? So the benefit of having wind on the system is that it equalizes and provides a hedge for power prices. And so what I tried to do is show you the area where wind can save you money. This is just a simplification, right? That shows wind at about $33 a megawatt hour. That's really, really good. Wind in Illinois is different. It can go between 35 and 40. But those costs are coming down. The point that you can illustrate here is the price hedging and how wind can be. It might be more expensive at some times. It might be more expensive up front, but in the long term, it's going to be cheaper because it's going to save us all money. And that's what Illinois Power Agency studied. They looked at this over the course of the past few years. They did this in 2011 and 2012, and they found that on average, that's about $177 million a year for Illinois ratepayers, which is great, right? We talk about the 2% rate cap and all that, how we're putting some millions of dollars into renewables, but we're saving $177 million. The IPA doesn't net that out. Right? They don't look at how much we spend versus how much we save and come up with an aggregate number. They only calculate how much we spend. So, but regardless, when we inject a lot of renewables into the system, we're saving money. Not to mention the whole clean air thing and that whole thing, right? So, I think that's a significant phenomenon that's really grown as renewables have expanded in the state. So, that's my general wind overview that I wanted to give for folks. I did want to talk a little bit about municipal aggregation. I know this committee you were involved in the Muni Ag deals, right?
Yes. Yeah, this commission's probably pretty familiar with it.
Okay, gotcha. I figured you would be. So I won't spend too much time on the basics. what I will talk about, though, is the opportunity for municipalities to get involved and do something unique with your community ag contracts. So what you guys are probably doing is you're buying recs. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So are they? Do you know who you're buying? Are you just buying them from the Aries?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
They're mostly coming from Iowa.
Iowa, right? Okay. Gotcha. You can specifically require that they buy in-state.
You can, but then you may experience a higher price.
You might. That's true. Iowa's got good wind. They do. Yeah, you can require that. That's one way. There are some municipalities that have done that. So again, looking at kind of options, you can buy recs, you can buy local recs, you can buy in-state recs. It just all depends on the cost, right? And that's kind of the 101 thing that a lot of communities did. Are you guys still on 100? Is it 100%? What's
Yes.
the percentage? Is it? Congratulations. Thank you. A lot of communities have gone to like 50% and done different things. So that's a significant move to go to 100%. Communities can also just require low emission power. So, for instance, the city of Chicago they have a renewable energy mandate that they meet in addition to the RPS, but then they also said, we don't want to buy any coal. And so basically that means they're buying a bunch of nukes and natural gas and wind in Chicago, but Chicago's a big player. That's 3 million residential accounts, right? So that's huge that they were able to do that. And again, it allowed there to be more, just a broader, cleaner portfolio for the city. You can look at power source labeling. So even if you can't, let's say you couldn't go to 100%, the costs get too high, let's say you go to 50, but then you can require in your contract that they disclose where the power is coming from, right? Aries don't like to do that. They don't like to tell you where they're getting their power from, because then they might be attacked for it publicly. But you can require that, and then that makes them more apt, I think, to buy cleaner sources of power, because they don't want to have to tell people. And then, so number 4 is the more interesting ways to do it, right? You don't just have to buy recs. There are other things that you can do as a city, I think, that become really interesting. So what you could do, and Urbana may have done something like this, you can create a special fund. So you can kind of siphon off a fraction of a percent off everybody's bill that goes into an account that's managed by the city. That fund can sit there, and you can develop certain ways that it can be spent, but you can essentially use that money for grants to members of the community who want to build wind and solar, right? I would strongly encourage you, as we're talking about this, if you're encouraging individuals in the community to build renewables, they should be building solar. Wind is a utility scale technology. Solar is the consumer scale technology. Except for a very small number of consumers that live in outside of town, no one should be doing small scale wind on their house. Solar is much easier. It's much more effective on a small scale. On the big scale, it's the reverse. Wind is cheaper and wind is more effective. And solar is not as helpful. But on a residential scale, I would encourage you, look at small scale solar. So you can create that kind of a program within the city that can dole out specific grants and help folks to put renewables on their roof. There's also there's some problems with doing that too, right? Folks are going to complain, well, I don't want to be funding solar on my neighbor's roof, right? Okay, don't give it to residents. Give it only to city buildings, right? Put solar on every single municipal building in the city. And that's where the money goes, right? Then everybody benefits, because everybody's taxes theoretically go down because you're helping to defray the energy costs of the city, right? So that's another way that you can do it. And then that's kind of option 4B there, which is the municipal-owned renewables. So that's an option that, again, I think might be a little bit more attractive and avoids some of the political difficulties that you might deal with as a city. Is this an elected commission, by the way?
This commission is appointed by the mayor.
Okay, gotcha. So now, again, the mayor's not going to want that. No politician is going to want any kind of attack on a program like this, right? So, the municipal owned is a safer bet. The other thing that's a little more complicated that you guys could do is a rec bundling program. So let's say you've already got individuals with solar on their roofs. They can sell recs to the city, essentially. The city would then retire them, and it would come out of that pot of money, right? So there's a couple different ways that you can do it. The bundling thing is probably more hassle than it's worth, but it is a possibility that the city could look at. And so there are kind of some interesting ways that are kind of the 102 version, right? If buying RECs and buying in-state RECs is kind of the first way to do it, you can do some more dynamic things moving forward, with kind of increasing levels of difficulty. So the last option, this is something that Morgan brought up, which is power purchase agreements. And this is the more kind of sophisticated model, which we haven't seen any community go into this yet. But if you want to really talk about ways that a community can get renewable power, a power purchase agreement is definitely the way to do it. Are you guys familiar with the broad concept of a PPA? Have you educated them on that?
No, I didn't do that.
Okay.
They've taught me a lot.
Okay, right on. So it's basically you sign a long-term deal to actually buy the electrons from a particular source or particular company. The benefit of PPAs in a deregulated market like Illinois is that there's no real signal to a private company to build a wind farm or a solar project, right? We live in a world where we have 1 and 2 year power purchase deals. To build a wind farm or a solar project, you need a longer term financing deal. A city, however, could look at a power purchase agreement as an opportunity to help actually ensure that they're buying renewable power and ensuring that new renewable sources are being put on the grid. So theoretically, the city of Urbana would put out an RFP similar to what the university did. Say we want to buy, let's say it's 100 megawatts of power, and we want to buy that power for 20 years. And we'll take the cheapest bid that we can get, right? That's the simple way. There's a lot of other details to be dealt with too. That power is then supplied not just to the city itself, but to all of its residents. And so there's a possibility that Urbana could do that, whether with wind or solar. You're going to get cheaper costs with wind. But there's an opportunity to do that. In the long term, that could be really beneficial for the citizens of Urbana, right? Like if we see price spikes in electricity, and you guys have already hedged 75% of the electric load of the city of Urbana, that's a significant benefit if you're right. If you're wrong, you're on the short end of the stick, and the mayor's not going to be happy with you anymore, right? Because let's say that prices don't spike, and then the citizens of Urbana are locked into an above-market contract for 20 years. People aren't going to like that. It's going to be like I don't know if folks are familiar with the parking meters deal that got signed in Chicago a couple of years ago. They sold our parking meters for 80 years at above-market rates. It's a terrible deal for the city, and now they're locked in to this contract, right? It's a similar concept, right? Like, a municipality doesn't want to lock its citizens into something that could end up leaving them underwater in a few years. But at the same time, it's a challenge. It could leave citizens having made a great decision as a municipality, right? So that's one of the challenges that exists. One of the other challenges that exists with PPAs is that even under a muni ag deal, a ratepayer can always leave, right? So you can always, if you live in Urbana and you decide that you don't like this 100% REC deal that the city signed, and you want good old coal power and nuclear power, you can defect and you can go back to, was it Ameren? Are you guys on Ameren? Okay, I wasn't sure if you had a muni. So you can go back to Ameren if you really want to, right? Buy all that Dynegy coal power if you're really into it. So that's one of the problems that you also face as a community is that, let's say you sign that 20-year PPA and it looks great, and then for some reason you get like a Tea Party uprising in town, which probably not that likely in Urbana, but you get some uprising and people say, we don't want to have anything to do with that wind power, we're out of here. Then you've got, instead of having enough power for that 100 megawatts, you only need 90, right? Which means that the people that are left are paying more per kilowatt, right? So that's one of the challenges that you face, I think, also in doing the PPAs. Go ahead.
You still would pay for the 100, right?
You're still paying for the 100.
That's what I was going to ask. Well, first of all, if you have an opt-out for a 20-year deal, are you going to get any bidders? Or as you said, is the city on the hook for paying for all the power that was envisioned in the agreement?
Well, I guess it would depend on how you structure the contract, but ultimately someone is going to pay for it, whether it's the city as an entity or its citizens through their power bill.
Because typically with Muni Ag, you say you're going to get all, one vendor's going to get all of our customers.
Right.
But if they opt out, that's the vendor's loss. No
Right.
one's making that up.
Yeah, for sure. But what was the term of contract? About like 2 years?
2 years.
Yeah, right.
You can't. My question is, can you get that deal at 20 years? I suspect.
I don't
not.
think any wind generator probably wouldn't sign that deal, right? If there's a potential that they're going to lose 20% of their customer base, they're not going to wear that risk.
That's
Not
what
in today's market, right? You'd have to place the risk on the community, right? Because I don't think
And
there's.
you have to have an opt-out from UNA.
You can, yeah, yeah. In Illinois, there's always an opt-out,
Right.
right? I mean, that's the whole point, right? It's choice, right? It's not like you get to leave the utility just so you can be under the thumb of the Urbana Sustainability Commission, right? Like you have to. It's a tyrannic fist, I know. You know, but that's the option, is that it's a choice, and so ultimately there's going to be that uncertainty
And can we
there.
offer it to only a quarter of the population?
You-
The first 25% that signs up, and then if anybody opts out, then other people, like there's a waiting list for anybody who opts out.
So you could.
So you like opt in for a certain
Yeah.
amount.
So you-
And can we do it for less than a 20-year contract? Could it be a 10? The U of I can only do 10 years,
Right.
so our RFP was 10 years, but do,
I mean, with 10 years,
That's something that-
it gets higher cost, right? Like, which you're probably seeing, but the costs are going to get a little higher with 10 than 20, but the risk is less.
Right.
You know, you could probably, there are probably some developers out there that would finance new projects based on 10-year deals. You could also buy power from an existing wind farm. You know, you won't put new steel in the ground, but you're buying power. And maybe you could probably do a 10-year deal on something like that.
What's a minimum power level?
What do you mean?
Well, so, you know, there's got to be some kind of a threshold where, you know, below, say, you know, 100 megawatts, don't bother.
Right.
Nobody wants to do it. So is there a threshold level?
Yeah, I don't know where that is
Okay.
exactly, and it would probably depend on a lot of different factors,
Okay.
like the company itself and the specific wind resource at the site that they want to use. But there's definitely a breaking point,
Mhm.
right, at which
So
it
if we
becomes
look at
not
the
worth
map-
it building
okay.
one
If we look at
turbine.
the map of the wind projects, does that give us the sense of the order of magnitude that? I
If you
mean,
look
does
at the new projects that were listed, so one of them was 50 wind turbines, I
Yeah,
think. So
yeah.
that gives you a sense of.
Mhm.
there's a
Yeah,
33.
Okay.
and some of those.
It's a 4-turbine farm. Number 4 is only 4 turbines.
Oh yeah.
With a power purchase agreement, given intermittency, how are you guaranteed 100% renewable product?
Yeah, there'd have to be some shaping, right? And that's another challenge that the city's going to have to face.
Mhm.
There are consultants out there that can help you with that.
Mhm.
I'm not that, but there are people out there that can help you with that. That the university's probably using some of the same people that I'm thinking of. Or
We're not-
you have your own procurement people,
Yeah.
right?
We're a participating member of MISO.
Oh, okay,
We
so-
supply cells straight to the grid.
Okay. So, but you'd need someone to help you work on that shaping for sure.
Okay.
But in the end, you'd be receiving whatever percentage.
So
of your
basically,
power.
you buy the power in the RECs. You get the power when it shows up, and you use the RECs to cover all of the power you need.
Okay, so you basically time shift your electron.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that's
Right.
the method that we're being
You
told is
offset
a good
gas
idea.
for when you have to burn gas.
Yeah. Right.
With an extra production loss. Okay.
I mean, with a lot of power deals, not just with renewables, you're never like if Dynegy signs a deal with Ameren to supply 1,000 megawatts of coal, they're not necessarily buying the electrons from that plant, right? That's the way that the power sector and the electric grid works physically. But you're right; it's kind of an accounting question that you'd be able to achieve that 100%.
Mhm.
But you would still need someone to manage that shaping. Theoretically, an Aries could do that. For
When you
you.
say shaping, is that do you mean the terms of the agreement?
No,
Or
I
you
mean,
like wind load stuff.
I mean, like, let's say that you've got, again, it's not a good example, but if you have a production shape of wind where it produces certain hours a day at a certain level, and then it reduces certain hours of the day, you have to fill in those gaps. That's what I mean by shaping, to ensure that your wind production profile matches the load demand profile of the city. And that can be done, right? Like, the university does that right now, every day, as a member of MISO, with standard power. So it's just a little bit more sophisticated. What you could do, though, to your original question, Scott, about how a municipality could manage one of these contracts, you could sign a deal that's not 20 years, maybe sign something with an existing wind farm, so that then there's not as much upfront risk. There's some wind farms in Illinois that are 10 years old now. There's some projects out there that are it's called merchant, which means they're just selling power into the spot market. They'd be probably interested in talking. to a community, the same way that they're probably interested in talking to the university. The opportunity is there. You also mentioned, I think it was you, Morgan, you said, could you do an opt-in contract?
Yeah.
Right? There's a utility, the utility for Austin, Texas, Austin Energy, has actually done that. They did this going back years ago, like 10 years ago, where essentially you sign up, it's an opt-in, and you say, it's kind of like an old Groupon, right? It was like, if we can get enough customers to sign up to buy 10 megawatts of wind power, we'll go in the market and we'll buy 10 megawatts of wind power, but if you sign up, you're locked in for 10 years or whatever. And what was interesting about it, a lot of businesses signed up for it. Not as many residents, but a lot of businesses, because it was a price hedge, and they were looking at price spikes and stuff going up and down for years, and they looked at it and said, wow, this wind, it might be $55 a megawatt hour, but it's consistent, it's stable, we can bank on that. So a lot of companies subscribed to it. It was so successful that they sold out every single year, every time they did it. So, Urbana could do something like that. But again, it's a little more sophisticated. You'd need to get the attorneys that can help you draft those contracts. And then the other thing that I never quite understood about Austin Energy's program was, what if companies go out of business? What if people move away, right? And I don't know how that risk was managed, right? Because a big company that they might have said, yeah, we're all in. We'll sign a contract to buy power at this rate for 15 years. But what if they go bankrupt? Then who holds that risk? And I think that's something I never quite understood. But that is another model that could be a possibility. For a city that was willing and had the capabilities and obviously the intellectual firepower to make it happen. So, again, that's another option that would be.
And the other option is the city facilities themselves, like a business, would be very interested in a consistent price, a price hedge. The problem is, in terms of a new build, we don't have enough demand to warrant it.
Right.
Now, if there was 49 facilities going in and one more expansion location that wasn't sold, they already got the crew out there. They might do it, for us, but they're not going to mobilize and get the contract people together to sign a contract for a wind turbine.
That's true. Right. And there was a city that tried to do that. A couple schools tried to do that a couple years ago, and I don't think they were. That was too difficult because it was like 3 schools, and they were trying to do this joint contract, and they meant well, but I don't think they had the capability. Urbana is obviously a bigger entity, and you're only one entity, so it might be more possible. And they were looking to do the same thing, add on like 13 megawatts to a 50 megawatt project that was going to be built next year, But again, you can do the same thing with an existing merchant wind farm. Again, theoretically. There's a lot of details to be worked out, but...
Scott, I was thinking about just the ability to make informed decisions around that. So part of it is understanding like you're talking about, what's the shape or what's the demand profile. So with the city, and I forget where we're at with smart metering, but you can ask for the municipal account demand curves. We can get that stuff, but I wonder. We've had challenges getting non-municipal accounts in the city, and so I wonder if we wanted to get a sense of, well, what's the demand profile for kilowatts on a dynamic basis, throughout the year? Are we going to be able to get that information?
I don't know the answers to that.
You mean specific for residential and the community at large?
At some,
or just in general?
At some minimum level of breakdown, say if we want say a sector, residential, commercial, on a monthly average basis, say, on a monthly, say...
An average load for April, or a day in April?
Yeah, exactly. On an hourly, what's the hourly demand on a day in December, January, March? Those seem like some of the minimum things we need to be able to evaluate that as a real... at U of I, you have all that stuff at your fingertips. It's easy. But anyway, just curious.
Yeah, that's a real challenge. But I think you could probably, again, if you got the right consultant that could look at, you'd never peg an exact number, but you could probably get some pretty accurate trends right? Because we're all pretty predictable in how much power we use, right? Like you can look at, the average size of a home and the average cost of heating it and lighting it, and we all tend to use power at about the same time. So you can probably look at the number of residential accounts, and you could probably look at the broader number of C&I, commercial industrial customers, and you can probably come up with pretty significant or pretty accurate projections. And that's without getting any utility-specific data that might be out there. Like, MISO might put out data on individual substations, and I don't know that. But you might be able to drill down lower and lower.
Maybe we could crowdsource it and just ask all of the residents to check their meter every couple of hours. And then we take that and
Sort of
we
describe how
GIS.
fast it's spinning.
Just have them put it on Twitter.
It'll crunch the numbers.
Right. Right. Just do like hashtag Urbana
It's totally
energy
plausible.
profile. It's totally workable. Yeah.
And
Help us
really
with that.
accurate.
Yeah. Put some students on it. It'll be great. So that is one of the challenges. But I think you could come up with a pretty accurate
Okay.
projection.
And the demand or the wind generation is typically peaking around in the evening.
Right.
Is that? Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And so you wouldn't. But again, you're talking about. It's kind of it's not that you're just plugging into a wind farm, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's more or less a financial transaction. So you're going to settle up one way or another. So wind is going to probably peak during the evening hours, right? And so that's going to generate RECs, and it's going to generate a certain amount of power. And then that's going to be a contractual relationship that you're going to have with that project. So you're never going to. It's never going to match directly.
But like Morgan said, don't you just hold the RECs when you're, from
Yeah.
one
You
point in
buy
the
all the
day to
energy,
another?
you buy all the RECs.
Right.
So, for instance, if Urbana city facilities use 6 million kilowatts a year, and we don't want to say overbuy, and we say we just do a PPA for 5.5 million kilowatts of wind, and it's sort of net metered for the end of the year, or the end of the years for the contract.
Mhm.
I mean, aren't you really buying X amount of kilowatts for a contract period for a price, and you're paying someone to put them on the grid for you? It doesn't really matter when you take them off.
Yeah, I mean, when you start to get into real PPAs, it starts to matter.
Okay.
That's why again it's a little more complex. But generally you're correct. Yes.
And in the PPA, are you buying kilowatt hours or megawatt hours, or are you buying kilowatts or megawatts?
You'd be buying kilowatt hours,
Okay.
megawatt hours.
And you're also buying capacity and there's the third part.
Yeah. Well, capacity. Well,
Power.
ancillary services you won't.
Power Rex capacity. Those
Right.
are the three.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But you can design a contract to buy whatever you want.
So you buy the kilowatt hours,
Mhm.
but then you take them when the wind is blowing, right? So you just accept them whenever they come, as opposed to a even amount. The price stays even. That line right there, the green line, the price is even, but the amount fluctuates with the wind.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And you get more on winter nights and less on summer afternoons.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
So now you could do the same thing again. You can do the same thing with solar, right? It'll just cost you more, but you can do the same thing. And with that, production is obviously more closely correlated to load, right? So if that's your load throughout the course of the day, kind of spiking around 5 p.m., your solar production is similar to that, right? It's just that green line is going to be way higher. So, but again, there's a possibility there.
So if you take them when they come, then you have to know the floor level of your demand.
Yeah, for sure. Right, which is going to be pretty low, but you'll have some idea of what that is. But again, if you're
Unless
doing,
you can sell it back.
and you can,
And you can pay more to only get the, you can pay a higher price in order to buy it at a set production
Okay.
instead of the full capacity of
Right.
what's flowing.
right, the risk you can pay the risk premium, essentially,
risk
and they'll shape it for you, and then sell you a block of power based on what your demand is. But again, it'll just cost you a little more than just buying the raw power and doing the shaping yourself. So it's a possibility. It's just, as we can see, it's complex, and I don't have all the answers. I just have the basic concepts. Again, I'll go back to it. The simpler thing to do is that loan or rebate fund.
Well, I mean, as we thought about it locally, there's a pretty strong tyranny to the opt-out, which is the law, as you said, everywhere in Illinois.
Mhm.
That once you start being once you start selling power more expensive than the opt-out rate, you can expect your market to evaporate.
People are going to leave, of
pretty
course.
quickly.
Right.
So, I mean, honestly, that what as attractive as power purchase agreements are, it's like, you know, how many people are going to join a club? You know.
Yeah, I understand. Right.
Oh, that
10.
price.
Yeah, right. Mom, you're in. Sign up. So, I mean, I think that's one of the challenges that you'd have, and it's also then it becomes about optics, and it becomes about word of mouth, and even if the cost isn't higher and the long-term costs are lower, if people think it's higher,
Yeah.
they're going to opt out.
That's fair.
Whereas why the Austin Energy Program worked so well, because you had businesses that understood their energy use,
Mhm.
they made a conscious decision, and they knew that it may be higher today, but the long-term benefit is in our favor.
Right.
Average person isn't a sophisticated energy consumer,
No.
right? And again, if they just hear a rumor or they hear something on Facebook about how expensive this renewable contract is, even if it's cheaper, they might try to leave. So that you face a perception problem with a PPA. You know, even if the facts are totally on your side.
For the renewable portfolio standard,
Yeah, sure. Good segue.
are you going to go into that a little
I
bit?
can.
Well,
I've talked a lot.
I just don't understand. If the generators in Illinois have to use a certain amount of renewables,
Mhm.
and then we're buying power
The
from
utilities
them.
have to use a certain amount of renewables.
Thank you.
Right.
The utilities have to use
Right.
a certain percentage of renewables,
Yep.
which like a couple years ago it was like 12% was clean energy.
Right. This year it's 12%.
12% is right now. And so then if I were buying from the conventional electricity instead of through the aggregation system, which is what I'm doing, but
Right.
then am I getting 12% renewables or not because the RECs are going off some other place?
Well, you're getting the RECs, right?
Well, am I personally? I don't see any RECs. There's nothing that tells me.
You don't get to. They retire the
Municipal
RECs for
electric
you.
aggregation report.
Yeah, you can read the reports on the ICC website. It's really exciting.
So the users of that power do get the RECs.
And the
They don't-
contractual purchaser gets them, so the city gets them.
Right. In the case of a mini ag
Well,
deal,
for the
the
ag.
city.
Yeah.
But for the conventional
regular.
electricity, somebody who
Oh.
opted out and they're buying just straight
Am-
from
The 12%?
Ameren, do they get the 12? Do
No,
they,
Ameren gets them.
Ameren retires those RECs on your behalf.
Right.
They're retiring. So
The
they're
energy you're using is 12%
Right.
renewable.
It is.
Mhm.
well. The energy you're using is whatever the grid mix is, but they have purchased 12%. They've purchased enough RECs to equal 12% of their broader energy portfolio.
And they're retiring them on behalf of the user.
on behalf of the
consumers.
user,
Okay.
right? So that
They're
then you
not then selling
They
them.
can't sell them
No.
twice.
no, they can't sell them twice, right? And it's
I don't know if
actually
they counted it as selling it to us or not. Those.
Mm.
Okay.
we've raised that question at the Commerce Commission, by the way,
Yeah,
but
nice.
they are supposed to retire those RECs. And in the case of Illinois, because of our goofy, convoluted regulatory structure, the Illinois Power Agency actually is the counterparty to those REC contracts, and they retire them. So that prevents that from
So they
happening.
are definitely.
So they're not, yeah. But we've been concerned that what you're talking about could be happening with some of the purchases that the competitive suppliers are making, but we don't have any reason to assert that other than that it's a suspicion.
And do you know why the rec pricing in MISO is so very low? It's like $1.20.
Because there's a
for
lot of RECs in North
megawatt hours.
Dakota. So primarily it's because it's just supply and demand, right? Like there's
There's just-
tremendous numbers of RECs out in those Dakota states and Minnesota and Iowa. But it's also because so a lot of the RECs in every MISO state, with the exception of the downstate half of Illinois, are totally regulated markets, right? So the cost of building those wind projects, the 5,000 megawatts of wind in Iowa and the 3,000 megawatts in Minnesota and the 2,000 in North Dakota, it was all built on a rate base, right? So it was all built under a traditional regulatory model. The costs were passed on to consumers, and the benefits were passed on to consumers too. But under a traditional vertically integrated model, the utility doesn't have to retire those RECs. They can do whatever they want with them. So in some cases, Mid-American Energy, which is the utility in Iowa, has built 5,000 megawatts of wind. And then they get to do whatever they want with the RECs, including sell them anywhere they want. So basically, Does that make sense?
Yeah,
They've
so-
rate based
so
the
they're-
RECs and then they're selling
generating
elsewhere.
it.
They're double dipping.
They are double dipping.
They're able to double dip, but so for them, those
Do the
dollar RECs,
ratepayers benefit from those sales?
their ratepayers benefit.
Okay.
Now, granted, you could also say that our ratepayers benefit because then we get to buy RECs for $1.
Right.
But
Right.
is it achieving the goal? Is it creating the additionality, which means more kilowatts of green power on the grid? No. So that's one of the inherent shortcomings of using RECs as a derivative product, right? Especially when you allow rate-based RECs to qualify. So that's one of the reasons why RECs are so cheap in MISO. Not to mention they just have really good
Why do they
rates.
still get certified? Okay, totally off topic, I know, but
You're speaking to the choir on that one.
you shouldn't be able to certify them if they're using them somewhere else.
Right, and they shouldn't be counted for compliance in the state of Illinois, which we agree. But again, that's the current law, which is broken in more fundamental ways than this. So, but that's one of the challenges, right? Like they've got these cheap RECs and we don't. So do you guys want to hear about the RPS problem? I'll try to blaze through this as quickly as we can. This gets really, really wonky. So I found this slide on the internet. I think it's great. And it's really good for this purpose too. Because it talks about the unintended consequences of municipal aggregation. So that's the other problem here, is that we created this RPS mandating 25% renewables by 2025, and then a couple years later we created the municipal aggregation program. I was involved in creating that municipal aggregation program. We never thought that the problems that came up would happen. The two programs didn't work together, and it wasn't a nefarious amendment slipped in by Exelon or something. No one anticipated what would happen. And so I think this is just kind of the growing pains of a deregulated electric market, and we're seeing that in Illinois. We're not the only state to be dealing with this, by the way, but it's just unintended consequence we never expected, where the Muni Ag program hinders the RPS. So the main reason is that it gets down to load migration. We're getting into some real wonky territory here. So you've got all these consumers that can leave from the utility portfolio and go to Aries service. That didn't really happen much until Muni Ag happened. It doesn't. You ever have those people come to your door and ask you switch to direct energy or whatever?
Today.
Yeah, that happened to you today. It happened to me today too. And they tried, and I knew way more than they did, right? So I pity these very nice kids trying to sell me power that I knew much more about than they did. But they came to my house today, right? That's not a very reliable business model to pick off onesies and twosies, right? It makes more sense to pick off whole communities, right? The Urbanas, the Springfield, well, not Springfield, but the Urbanas, the Normals, the Rockfords, and then, of course, the Chicagos. Huge blocks of customers all at one time. That's a good business opportunity. When that happened, that dramatically changed the power market in Illinois. Something like 60 to 80% of the utility load switched, right, within like 2 years, right? And that was really good because it saved a lot of money, as you guys know, and it allowed municipalities to do very unique things. But what it also did is it created this tremendous amount of uncertainty in the power market. So no longer was an Aries who signed a deal with you guys for 2 years. They signed a deal with Chicago for 2 years. They signed a deal, with Bolingbrook for 2 years. They're going out into the wholesale market.
Is Aries the name of our company, or is that
Alternative
an acronym?
Retail Electric.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank
sorry,
you.
yes.
That's all right. Good. Move
I'm
on.
trying to not use the FAFWA here too much.
That's good.
But anyway, yes, that's all of the companies. There's like 80 of them in
All right.
Illinois.
Yeah.
Many of the Aries, by the way, are just large consumers themselves. University's probably its own Aries.
We're not an Aries, we're an independent market participant.
Okay, gotcha. So that's right. That's kind of lower down on the rung.
I think that's what they told me. I
That
know
would
we're
make
not
sense.
Aries.
That would make sense. That's kind of, you're a more sophisticated buyer. Some buyers are so big, like ADM and CAT, that they're like, well, we'll just become our own utility. All they do is buy power on the wholesale market, sell it to themselves. But they get so big and they buy so many gazillion megawatt hours that they just become their own utility.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's areas that only serve large industrial consumers, and then there's areas that serve only municipalities, right? So in any case, all of these areas buy power on a 1 to 2 year basis because that's what they're selling, right? They're selling power on a short-term basis, so they go into the wholesale market and buy power on a short-term basis. And they do that because their consumers might leave, right? People might opt out. The city of Urbana could decide who's your Aries.
Home field.
could decide home field sucks and you're going to go back to Ameren, which is home field's just a subsidiary of Ameren
Not
anyway.
anymore.
Oh, they're not. Oh, okay. So you could just leave. It creates this tremendous uncertainty for the utility. So for the Aries, they're not going to buy power on a long-term basis because they could lose all their customers. Looking over on the utility side, they just lost 80% of their customers. Now maybe they could come back, if the market changes in some dramatic way, but there's still the certainty that they might all reshift back over to an Aries. It's a constant back and forth, right? There's this tremendous uncertainty just built into the system. The problem is the financial timelines that you need to build new generation. And this is a fundamental shortcoming of a competitive marketplace, right? So again, I've got the short-term basis for the Aries and the utilities, but what a wind energy developer needs is a long-term contract. That's, by the way, I use renewables here. If you want to build a nuclear or a coal plant, you'd have the same problem, right? Wall Street doesn't loan you $300 million because you have a buyer for 2 years, right? You need to have a long-term buyer for that power. This is going to be a problem for traditional generation someday in Illinois. It's just not right now because we have more generation than we need. It's a problem right now in Maryland and New Jersey, where they do need more generation and they can't build it because they have these short-term competitive marketplaces. So that's the fundamental problem of the RPS, is that Aries are buying short-term, utilities are buying short-term, developers need long-term. And that's the fundamental mismatch is the real challenge of the RPS. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, I mean, isn't this a constant push and pull of the marketplace? So a few scary spikes and everyone will crave a long-term contract that's stable.
So and you're right, but in power, in the power sector, for some reason, the banks don't go short-term. They don't want to take that kind of risk.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's, I'll give you the counterexample is like real estate, right? If Donald Trump builds a skyscraper, he doesn't need 20 years of tenants. Right? He just needs tenants for a couple of years, and he's going to inherently take some risk. That doesn't happen in the power sector. I think it probably is a historic question of that's how power has always been developed. I think it's also a question of some states are still vertically integrated, right? So why would you invest in a power plant in a deregulated state when you could just invest at one
rate base
it and be done with it and ensure that you're going to get a 10% rate of return? Why invest in these crazy, wacky, competitive marketplaces like Illinois and Pennsylvania, Jersey? So that's the one of the challenges that's happening in the competitive markets.
How many states are like this?
Oh God, most in the Northeast. I don't know, probably 15 to 20, something like that, in different stages of deregulation. Every state kind of does it differently. Certainly, no state has done it like Illinois, but every state has done it differently. And there's been growing pains along the way, right? Like the California energy crisis, the whole Enron thing in 2002 was another one where you switch to a competitive market and it's total supply and demand. Well, if you're the largest generator, you can just figure out how to create fake shortages, right? And that's what Enron was doing. You should watch the film The Smartest Guys in the Room, if you haven't already. Because you have these guys just manipulating the market. They're like, well, just shut that plant down. That'll create a shortage. That'll skyrocket the price to $1,000 a megawatt hour. And, what about grandma's electric bill? And they're like, who cares about grandma? And they have these people on tape, right? It's like remarkable. So, and those are kind of growing pains that happen of deregulating a power market. And I think we're still working through a lot of those. So in Illinois, we've done things in our own goofy, unique way. So what we did when we created the RPS in Illinois was part of a broader energy bill where we created the Illinois Power Agency, which is the broker that kind of stands between the generators and the utilities. The reason we did that is because there was market manipulation here. The challenge that we have in Illinois is that our largest utility, ComEd, is owned by our largest generator, Exelon. So they kind of had an inherent incentive to overcharge themselves and pass on those rates to consumers. So in 2007, when we created the RPS in Illinois, we also created this Illinois Power Agency to be the traffic cop, so to speak, between the two. So what we did, we have the utilities buying power in a certain way, and then the Aries are also covered by the RPS, and they procure power in their own ways. There's two ways that the Aries procure power. So I try to represent this visually with this goofy-looking slide here.
The broom, I love it.
Yeah, that's the sweeps. We'll get to that in a minute. So basically, you have two kinds of entities: Aries and utilities. The Aries procure power and renewables in one way, and the Aries do it in one of two ways. And I'll give you these slides if you want.
Yeah, show some.
Go ahead. So yeah, we all love government fund sweeps, don't we? So you have this convoluted system where we're all procuring power in different ways, and the quantities vary annually because of that load migration. So at first, the utilities had all the customers, and then they had all the money. And then when Muni-Ag happened, it shifted over to the right side, and all the folks are on Aries. But then within the Aries community, they have multiple ways that they can comply. They can either buy the RECs themselves for half of their load, but the other half of their load, they have to pay this goofy compliance payment back to the IPA. And that comes out to about $150 million a year, and that's those Aries RECs. The money that they didn't spend on RECs, they just pay into the IPA fund. That money goes into an account managed by the Illinois Power Agency that the IPA is supposed to turn around and use to go out and buy their own RECs. They're supposed to lump that together on the utility side and buy even more RECs. The problem, one of them, is that the law doesn't allow the IPA to use that money unless they're doing something for the utilities. The law states they must do it in conjunction with the utility procurement. Problem there is IPA hasn't done a utility procurement in a couple of years for various reasons, primarily because they lost all their load. The other big problem, which you can probably imagine, when you put $150 million of ratepayer funds into a state account, and we have a budget crisis, you can imagine what happens to that money. So that money's gone. Quinn took about $50 million at one point. Rauner just took $98 million. We didn't even talk about it very much because we knew it was coming, and it was just too attractive. I mean, it's $98 million.
I thought they had pulled it down to almost nothing, and then built it back up, and now it's going down.
No, now it's still growing. It's still well, now it's gone.
No, I mean the amount in the fund.
The amount of the fund was continued to grow. Yeah, because people are still with Aries, and that means that they're still putting the money into the account. But it was taken. So. And
then before Quinn, it was already rated, and then during Quinn, it got sort of refilled. That was the story.
I think
it's
Quinn.
A story.
You're right. It's a goofy, convoluted story.
Remember.
But the problem is that it exists anyway. That's the key problem, right? The fact that this system that I had to make this silly slide to describe the goofy, convoluted system in Illinois. And the worst part about it, it's broken. None of it matters. We're not buying any renewables using any of this money. So it's an inherently broken system that we think needs to be scrapped and replaced altogether. We need to keep the RPS in place. We need to keep it in place for both utilities and the Aries, but the structure has got to change. So what we've proposed is a bill that would simplify this whole goofy system. Instead of having 3 different compliance mechanisms, you have one. Both utilities and Aries comply with it the same way. That creates one pool of money that the IPA can then direct the use of to buy renewable power. They can do it on a portfolio of short, medium, and long-term contracts so that they can hedge that risk long-term. That will allow, because you've got one buyer of power, that will allow a consistent flow of money from consumers to renewable energy generators, and that will provide the kind of stability that generators need to build long-term. That provides ratepayers with greater stability because it provides a hedge against price spikes for standard power and for renewables, which could come, and it allows municipal aggregation to continue. So a city like Urbana can continue to do all the fun things we talked about with PPAs and revolving funds and stuff. But meanwhile, this RPS will move forward unabated. So we've set up a structure where that will happen basically because each entity will pay a certain fee per kilowatt hour, and that's going to be competitively neutral, so every consumer is going to pay the same on a kilowatt hour basis. And that's, by the way, how we fund a lot of things on our electric bill already. There is an energy efficiency portfolio standard in Illinois already. That's funded through a wires charge, which is what we're proposing here. There's some other parts of the smart grid bill that are funded through a ratepayer charge. Again, it's the part of your bill that doesn't change. It's the part of your bill that it doesn't matter if you leave the utility and go to an Aries or you go back and you switch every 6 months. you're still paying a transmission part of your bill, and that's where we want to levy the costs for renewables. The cost cap remains the same. Hold on. The cost cap remains the same. We'll go to that slide in a minute. The cost cap remains the same, and we actually have growth that happens. So that's the approach that we're proposing. There's a bill out there that would achieve this goal, as well as do some other things. And so that brings me to my last slide. I found this great image on the web. And so right now there's a major debate happening in Springfield about the future of our energy portfolio. As you guys probably know, the US EPA has this Clean Power Plan where there's a regulation of greenhouse gases. That kicks it to the states to implement that, right? The feds set certain goals and they say the states have flexibility on how to implement it. The question of how we implement it is going to be decided by the General Assembly. And so there's a lot of different proposals out there to determine how we should get involved. Like I say, this graphic shows each one of those is a different energy source. I don't know if you can quite tell, but like there's a nuclear superhero and a wind superhero and a coal superhero up there. So I thought this would be a good description of things in Springfield right now. Obviously, we're trying to fix the RPS. That's a bill, that's a law that's been in place since 2007. We want to fix it. If we're going to pay for it, it should work. The environmental groups out there are advocating that energy efficiency is the way to do it. The cheapest energy that we have is the energy we don't produce. And there's a really good point there. So there's some opportunities in the same bill that fixes the RPS, the Clean Jobs bill, that would increase energy efficiency opportunities. Coal obviously is not going to do so well under the Clean Power Plan, but they have some goals that they're trying to achieve too by keeping their plants open, keeping those people employed. And then the other elephant in the room is the nuclear plants in Illinois. Exelon, the largest owner of nuclear facilities in the state of Illinois, is unprofitable. Their plants are big and they're not flexible and they have high overhead costs. At this point in today's power markets, they're unprofitable. So what do you do in Illinois when you're unprofitable anymore? You run to the General Assembly and you ask for a bailout. And so that's what Exelon is doing right now. They're looking to bail out their existing, they have 6 nuclear reactors in the state of Illinois. About 3 of them, 6 nuclear plants in the state. About 3 of those plants are pretty much underwater profitably. And so they're looking for some kind of financial support for them. They cloak it as an environmental program that they call a low carbon portfolio standard. I don't know if you're familiar. I call it an Exelon portfolio standard because the way they've written the bill, only Exelon would win, even though they say renewables would win. And so there's a lot of proposals right now on the table. You know, the nukes have something they want, coal has something they want, the enviros and the renewables companies. And there's a lot of different ways to approach the Clean Power Plan and how we're going to implement it in Illinois. My organization is supporting the Clean Jobs bill, which is House Bill 2607 and Senate Bill 1485. And so those bills are out there already. Both the Senate version passed committee about 2 weeks ago, so that was pretty significant. But we think what's going to happen is over the next couple of weeks, there's going to be, or over the next couple of months before the General Assembly adjourns at the end of May, there's going to be a lot of debate on kind of what, if something, maybe they put together an omnibus bill, and it's a question of what gets all put together, right? Something to help the nukes, something to help renewables and efficiency, that kind of thing. So I'm happy to help folks know how they might be able to get involved. I don't know, this body does take positions on legislation, is that right?
This commission may make recommendations to the mayor.
Okay, gotcha. Do you make recommendations to other local elected officials, or just the mayor?
No,
Okay.
Recommendations to the mayor and council.
Gotcha. So, because I was going to say, your state rep, your new state rep, Carol Emmons, is a supporter of the bill. I don't think Scott Bennett is. But if that's something that the commission's interested in doing, making a recommendation to the mayor, that would be great too. There's a lot of upside from this bill for cities like Urbana, especially, not just the RPS because it fixes that structural problem that we have, but also the energy efficiency opportunities are huge. If we expand those opportunities, it creates more money that individual ratepayers as well as businesses and municipalities can use to reduce their power bills. So the energy efficiency stuff is big, and there's a real opportunity there for a city like Urbana that's obviously forward-thinking and progressive to get involved in. And the best part about energy efficiency, it only saves money. ultimately it only saves money. They don't implement measures if they don't save money. So
Could you send
it's a real benefit.
some information about that to Scott to get to?
Yep, absolutely.
Within-
I forgot my handouts. I meant to bring my handouts with me, so I'll send the info to
Is the timeline
you.
enough that if we discuss it at our meeting next month, that we would still have
Yeah.
opportunity for him?
So the General Assembly session is until May 31st, and it actually could go longer this year. But it definitely goes till May 31st. So yeah, I'm happy to get you some information. If there's something that the commission could do, that would be great. But again, I think the important thing is just for you guys to kind of understand this big battle that's going on, because like I said, it's your money as not just appointed members of the commission, but as ratepayers and citizens of the state of Illinois. It's important to understand what the energy debate is about right now. So it's complicated, and thank you for listening to my long, silly, goofy, wonky speech about this. But any other questions I can answer for you guys? Anything else I can do for you?
Well, thank you very much for.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Large amount of information. This is great. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And I'll send you the info. So, cool.
All right.
Next piece.
We
There we
have Fernanda Maciel and
Yes.
Paul Noel to talk
Well,
to us about
actually,
water.
Fernanda Paul unfortunately couldn't come.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you for listening to my whole long speech.
What's interesting? So I promise to be short, and thank you for inviting me to talk about Illinois Water Day. So this event is going to be this coming Friday, April 10th, from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. at NCSA Lobby and Auditorium in the University of Illinois. So save the date. And first, I want to present our team, our organizing team. So this is a students' initiative. So we are all, I'm not going to talk about each one of us, but we are all master's and PhD students from the university in civil and environmental engineering in different areas. And we are also members of the IWRA student chapter, which is the International Water Resources Association. So Illinois Water Day, it's an event that we started organizing it last year, and it's inspired by the United Nations World Water Day. And the goals are to raise public awareness regarding freshwater resources challenges, also to foster critical thoughts and discussion about not only global but also local water-related issues, and most importantly, to bring together a local community. So we want to reach people and audience also from outside of the university, so from Urbana-Champaign. And we want to gather researchers, scientists, students, companies, local organizations, and also concerned individuals to discuss, share, learn, and teach about water issues. So this is last year event. As I said, it was the first time that we did it. And we had a keynote speaker. The theme was Water and Energy Nexus. And after that, several short talks. And finally, a poster session. We had approximately about 100 attendees, so it was good for a first time. And this year, we won a grant from QUASI, which is a consortium of universities for the advancement of hydrologic sciences. So the format of the event this year is called Let's Talk About Water, which promotes the using of film for earth science education. So first we're going to screen a movie and then have a panel discussion about the topics addressed in the movie, and we're keeping the poster session because it was a great success from last year. So considering that water and agriculture are tightly coupled and the importance of agriculture here in the Midwest, we selected the documentary Cowspiracy, The Sustainability Secret, which is have you seen it? Have you watched it?
No.
No? Okay. Well, it is a 2014 environmental documentary film, and it criticizes the destructive impact of animal agriculture on the environment. It also investigates the policies and perspectives of green organizations on this issue, and it challenges the meat-based diet and advocates for the transition towards a plant-based diet. Actually, the movie, it's a little bit controversial, and it says that the plant-based diet is the only solution to the sustainability problems from animal agriculture. So some of the topics that we want to discuss with the panel discussion are resource consumption, use and consumption. For example, land, water, food, because most crops that we farm are used to feed cattle, livestock. Also, the environmental impacts of animal agriculture on freshwater resources and climate change. How agriculture can be more sustainable, and is diet change the only solution? Are there other solutions? And if there is a massive diet change, what are the impacts on food security and on the economy here in the US and in the rest of the world? So the panelists that we invited are Stacy James from, she's a water resources scientist at Prairie River Networks, and her work focuses on policy reform to reduce pollution caused by farming at Illinois. Wesley Jarrell, who is a professor emeritus of sustainable agriculture and natural resources at the University of Illinois, and he's also the co-owner of Prairie Fruits and Farm, which tries to educate the community about organic and sustainable agriculture. Professor Megan Konar from the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and she's an expert on the intersection of water, food, and trade. And finally, Teresa Steckler. She's an extension specialist and educator for commercial agriculture at the University of Illinois, and she's an expert in commercial livestock agriculture. And finally, the poster session, we're expecting about 25 to 30 posters this year from students and local organizations that want to share their work related to water and network, discuss, learn. So this is the schedule of the event. The movie will start at 1 p.m. right after the some opening remarks. Then we'll have the panel discussion, and finally the poster session at 4 p.m. And more information can be found at our website, waterday.illinois.edu.
That's great.
And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I invite you all to join us this Friday. I hope you can make it.
Thank you.
Sounds like there's a lot of good information and good discussion that can come out of that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming and for staying so long.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We don't have any continuing or new business on the agenda this evening, so let's turn to announcements. And Scott looks like we had a few that were.
I'll leave a couple of flyers here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, I did have a couple announcements. On the agenda, Boneyard Creek Community Day is Saturday, April 18th at Scott Park. Spring leaf collection will be April 13th through the 17th and April 27th through May 1st on your U-Cycle day. And the rain barrel and compost bin sale I mentioned May 16th, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the parking lot north of the city building.
Can I make an announcement? The Prairie Research Institute is having their annual Naturally Illinois Expo April 17th and 18th, I believe. It's in a different location. It's been at the Natural Resources Building. It's going to be out at the Research Park at the Forbes Natural History Building and surrounding area. But, among other things, ISDC is going to have zero waste stuff at the expo, correct?
Yes, we are.
40 other exhibits.
Other announcements?
I have two.
Yeah.
One, the University of Illinois is working with, we're working on becoming a tree city, and I just wanted to tell you guys that we got a lot of help from Urbana. Mike Brunk is a member of our committee that is a part of the process, and
So campus can qualify for that?
we're going through the steps to apply in December.
Oh, wow.
It's not Tree City, it's Tree Campus.
Tree market participant.
Independent tree farmer. But so I just wanted to sort of give a shout out to Mike for helping us get on the, doing a joint proclamation. Normally there's a proclamation that's joint between the two cities. And we were able to, he helped me sort of last minute add the university to that. And so we're excited about that. We're going to plant a tree on the quad. It was slated to replace an old one that had to come out, and so we'll do it on Arbor Day, which is April 24th for anybody watching at home. So that's good news. The bad news is just that the DCEO pulled their renewable energy grants. So we had some work in progress that got stopped for the ECE rooftop solar. And we're looking at what we can do without the component that was coming from DECIO.
Is this, because, I've been hearing, obviously, I've been hearing a lot about this, but is this like a foregone conclusion, or, this still has to get through the legislature, doesn't it?
Well, we got
Or
to
does he
stop.
have
We
stuff
got a
that's
stop work
discretionary
order
where you can just
for it.
hold?
We had to stop.
The governor can direct the agency to act or to not act.
Okay. So it's not simply budgetary, he's actually coming in.
Yeah. So DCEO does not hold the funds, they bill to the utility companies that hold the funds that come. But, if they do not have authority to act, then the public sector grants and the other services can happen.
So it's kind of bad news, but I think it's important for people to be aware that these things are
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
That's it.
Just so we don't end on too down of a note. I
Should've
did see in
gone
the
the other
paper a
direction.
few weeks ago that Mayor Pressing was awarded the Public Official Award from the Illinois Water Environment Association for her work on the Boneyard Creek Master Plan and the Mahana Aquifer and creating a stormwater utility in Urbana. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Oh, I have another good thing to say. We're going to have, thanks to really significantly to Bart for starting it and seeing it through, but we're going to have a dual bin recycling system on the quad starting Thursday to Friday. They're going to have, so all the garbage cans will be together, and one will say landfill, and one will say mixed recyclables, and it'll be very public,
Good.
very front and center. And then ultimately that should spread to all of the campus
That's the
outdoor
theory.
recycling and then indoor recycling
Yeah.
or waste collection stations.
Well, we've already done some waste audits on that kind of bin station, and the contamination rates are actually a lot lower than we expected. So, pretty small sample right now, but we'll do additional audits all next week to see how it's performing compared to baseline audits that we did last fall.
That's pretty cool.
Anyone else?
I would like to mention that I had the Ameren Act on Energy audit in my house, and it was very interesting. They have all your bills already done and a heat camera thing going around. It's very interesting.
Neat.
Tell you exactly how much you'll save based on what work you can do.
Motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Those opposed to see you later.